I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who got left behind. I wasn't perfect, no one is, but I loved him with every ounce of myself. And for a while, I believed he loved me too. Mark and I met in college. We were young, broke, and full of dreams. He used to say my laugh was his favorite sound in the world. Back then, we didn't have much, just instant noodles and ideas scribbled on napkins, but we had each other. We built everything together: careers, a home, a life. We got married at 26, bought our first house at 30, and I thought we were finally living the life we once dreamed of in that cramped dorm room. Looking back now, maybe I should have seen the signs earlier. He stopped asking how my day was. He started working late too often. His phone, once an open book, became a locked vault. He stopped saying, "I love you," just because. I chalked it up to stress: his job, our responsibilities, life weighing on us. I tried to give him space. I tried to be understanding. Then came the perfume. It was subtle at first. A floral scent that didn't belong to me. I don't wear perfume often, never have. But it clung to his clothes, lingered on his collar. When I asked, he brushed it off. One of the interns wore too much today, he said with a chuckle, like I was being silly for even asking. I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. Or maybe I just wanted to keep the illusion alive. But illusions have a funny way of shattering when you least expect it. One evening, I came home early from a business trip. My flight had landed ahead of schedule. I didn't call to tell him. I wanted to surprise him, maybe bring back some spark. I walked through the front door quietly, balancing my suitcase in one hand and a little bag of pastries from his favorite cafe in the other. Laughter floated down the hallway, light, feminine, unfamiliar. And then I saw her. She was younger, slimmer. Her hair cascaded down her back like a shampoo commercial. She looked up from the couch, startled, lipstick smudged slightly. Mark froze. He didn't even try to pretend. He didn't shout or apologize. He just stood up slowly, rubbing the back of his neck, and said, "We should talk." I don't remember dropping the pastries, but I must have. The bag was on the floor, crushed, its contents seeping into the rug. That night, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I just packed a bag and walked out the door. My voice barely broke as I said, "If you want her, you can have her." And he did. For weeks, I drifted. I moved into a small apartment across town. The walls were bare. The silence was heavy. I went through the motions: work, eat, sleep on autopilot. Friends reached out, but I couldn't find the words to respond. It felt like someone had pressed pause on my life, and I was trapped in a scene I didn't choose. But here's the thing about pain: it can either destroy you or transform you. One rainy evening, as I stared out the window watching raindrops race each other to the sill, I realized something. I had given him everything: my time, my loyalty, my love. And he walked away like it meant nothing. But just because he didn't see my worth didn't mean it wasn't there. I started showing up again, not for him, but for me. I went back to work with a vengeance. I stopped taking the back seat. I pitched bold ideas, negotiated better deals, and slowly but surely climbed the ladder. I took control of my finances, my goals, and most importantly, my self-worth. It wasn't overnight. Some days I still cried in the shower. Some nights I woke up reaching for someone who was no longer beside me. But every day I chose to rise, to rebuild. And then came the opportunity. My company was expanding. We were acquiring a mid-sized firm that had been struggling under poor leadership. During the due diligence, I didn't pay much attention to the list of staff we'd be absorbing. HR would handle all that. I was more focused on strategy, integration, future growth. Until the first team meeting. He walked in wearing a tie, too tight, and a face too familiar. Mark. My ex-husband. sitting across the conference table, folder in hand, unaware of the storm he had just stepped into. He didn't see me at first. His eyes were fixed on the paper, probably reviewing notes or pretending to care. But when he looked up, when his gaze met mine, it was like time stilled. His mouth parted just slightly, his face paled. I didn't blink, I didn't smirk. I simply nodded and said, "Good morning, everyone." That was the moment I realized something profound. He had left me for someone younger, but now he worked for me. His face told 1,000 stories in that one glance. I didn't need to ask how he felt. The color drained from his cheeks, and for a second, he looked like a man caught stealing something he once owned. He opened his mouth slightly, like he wanted to say my name, but I turned back to the projector screen before he could form the words. There were more important things at hand, like the future of this company. And ironically, his future now depended on mine. I didn't make things personal. I never do. That meeting went on like any other. I presented our quarterly vision, introduced the roadmap, highlighted the team leads. When it came time to assign Mark's department, I didn't even flinch. "You'll be reporting to Jennifer now," I said calmly, my voice steady. "She help you get up to speed with our expectations?" He nodded stiffly, his eyes avoiding mine. After the meeting, I walked out without looking back. My heart was racing, but not from hurt, from power. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that comes when you've finally taken back control of your own story. Wish I could tell you I felt victorious, but in truth, I felt nothing, or maybe everything. All at once, memories flashed like broken film reels in my mind. Him holding my hand when we signed our first lease. The way he laughed when we danced in the kitchen. The silence in our bed the last few months before he left. And now that same man was filling out onboarding paperwork. Under my leadership, that night, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my balcony, watched the city lights flicker. I didn't want revenge, not really, but I wanted him to see what he gave up. I wanted him to feel deeply, painfully what it meant to lose something real. In the days that followed, Mark tried to approach me. Small talk, awkward hellos, forced professionalism. "Hi, long time. Thanks for approving my schedule. Your presentation was really great." I never responded with more than a nod. I wasn't rude, I was unreachable. I could see the confusion in his eyes. Like he didn't expect this version of me. The woman he left had cried, had begged, had disappeared. That the woman standing before him now wore tailored suits and smiled only when necessary. She held herself like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. It must have unsettled him. That I wasn't broken. Then came the moment I didn't expect. Late one afternoon, I was in the elevator heading to the parking garage. The doors were just about to close when a hand stopped them. Mark stepped in. Silence stretched between us like an invisible wall. He cleared his throat. "I didn't know. You were the one acquiring our firm." I didn't respond. I was surprised, he added. Softer. The numbers blinked above us, B3, B2, B1. "I never meant to hurt you like that," he said finally. I turned to him. "You didn't hurt me by leaving. You hurt me by pretending I wasn't enough." He stared at me, stunned. The elevator doors opened, and I walked out without another word. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need closure. What I needed was to keep walking. But of course, things are never that simple. Word travels fast in corporate hallways. It wasn't long before people started whispering, "Isn't that her ex-husband? Did you see the way he looks at her?" I heard she built this department from the ground up. One afternoon, I overheard a younger employee giggle. "Imagine leaving your wife and then ending up working for her. Karma's wild." I didn't correct her, but part of me wondered if Mark heard it too. Then something changed. He started showing Up early, staying late, volunteering for tasks. His reports were meticulous, his tone respectful, almost humble. One morning, Jenna, his direct manager, knocked on my door. "He's been working hard," she said, a bit puzzled. "Actually, he's really talented. Just seems like he's trying to prove something." I smiled faintly. "Let him." But the shift didn't stop there. I caught him one day in the break room, looking through the glass at the city skyline, coffee untouched in his hand. When he noticed me, he said, "You always believed in me more than I believed in myself." I didn't reply because it was true. I had carried the weight of both our dreams. I had poured energy into building a life where we could both thrive, and he walked away from it for what? Someone younger? A thrill? The illusion of something new. The thing about illusions is they fade fast, especially when reality sets in. That week, I got an email from her, the woman he had left me for. Just a few lines. "I thought you should know. We're not together anymore." He's been coming home late, distant. I guess old habits die hard. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He had left me for a dream. But dreams don't file taxes, do laundry, or build futures. And now, that dream had evaporated, and he stood there, blinking in the ruins of what he thought he wanted. The funny thing, I didn't feel the need to gloat. I just watched, quietly, as the man who once walked away from my life now watched mine grow without him, and somehow that silence was louder than any revenge could ever be. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can leave you in pieces and then circle back as if those pieces weren't sharp enough to cut them too. Mark started avoiding eye contact in meetings. He spoke only when necessary. Gone was the man who used to dominate conversations, who once believed his presence was the most important in a room. Now he blended into the background, quiet, careful. It wasn't guilt. I don't think. It was recognition. Of what he'd lost and what I'd become without him. I had meetings lined up for weeks. My schedule was relentless. But I noticed, more often than not, that he would linger. Not obviously, just always around. In the hallway, in the elevator, at the coffee machine. Once. He even left a sticky note on my desk. No name, just a scribbled line. "You always knew what mattered." I'm sorry it took me so long. I didn't keep it. I also didn't throw it away right away. For some reason, I stared at that yellow square longer than I care to admit. Not because I still loved him, but because a part of me, a deeply buried part, remembered the version of him I once believed in. But belief doesn't build a life. Actions do. And his, well, they spoke volumes. Around this time, something shifted in me. But anger wasn't gone. It had simply changed shape. It no longer burned, it simmered, controlled. Directed. I started receiving invitations to speak at leadership panels. Business journals asked to interview me about female executive success stories. One outlet ran a piece titled, "From Rock Bottom to the Boardroom, Her Quiet Rise to Power." I smiled at the title. They didn't know the half of it, and still he stayed in my orbit. He hadn't left the company. Maybe he couldn't afford to. Or maybe he thought there was still something left to salvage. But one thing was clear. He wasn't the same man who had walked out on me that night with a suitcase and a smirk. No, that man was gone. What stood before me now was someone quieter, humbled, maybe even lost. One afternoon, I saw him sitting alone in the courtyard during lunch. He wasn't eating, just staring at a photo on his phone. I didn't mean to look, but it caught my eye. It was a picture of us. From years ago, standing in front of our first apartment. He had his arm around me, and we were both laughing at something the photographer had said. He caught me looking. "I never deleted it," he said quietly. Couldn't bring myself to. I looked at him for a moment, then said, You should have thought about that before you deleted me from your life. I turned and walked away, and yet something in his eyes haunted me. That kind of sadness, the deep, consuming kind, doesn't just come from regret. It comes from realizing you can't go back, that some doors, once closed, never open the same way again. He started making small efforts. He'd leave coffee at my desk, offer to help with reports, compliment my ideas during meetings. But it wasn't flattery. It felt more like reverence, as if he'd finally seen me clearly and was unsure how to stand in the same light. Then came the internal promotion list. Our company was restructuring, new team leads, new opportunities. HR had asked me to review potential candidates for a strategic director role. It was a big step: visibility, influence, a real seat at the table. Mark's name was on the short list. I stared at it for a long time, not out of spite, but because I truly wondered whether he deserved it. He had the skill set, the experience, and lately he had shown maturity, humility even. But was it real, or just desperation masked as effort? That night, I sat at my desk long after everyone else had gone home. The office was silent. The city twinkled in the distance. I thought about all the years we'd spent together, the promises made, the betrayal endured, and the woman I had to become to survive it. Could I trust him again? Not as a partner, as a professional. And that's when I realized something profound. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it sure as hell doesn't mean reopening the door for someone to hurt you again. But sometimes forgiveness is about reclaiming your power, choosing grace not for them, but for you. So the next morning, I signed the approval form. I gave him the role, not as a gift, as a test. I wanted to see what kind of man he'd become. When I handed him the letter in person, he looked at it, then at me, eyes wide with disbelief. You recommended me? I met his gaze. I recognize potential when I see it. I always did. His lips parted like he wanted to say more, but I raised a hand gently. This isn't a second chance at us, Mark. This is a chance at you. Don't waste it. He nodded slowly. And for the first time in a long time, there was no smugness, no entitlement, just quiet gratitude. But I still didn't trust him, because trust isn't something you earn back with flowers or words. It's earned with time, with truth, with change, and he had a long way to go. People often think revenge looks like fire, loud, blazing, unstoppable. But sometimes it's ice, silent, measured, patient. I wasn't seeking revenge. I didn't want to humiliate him. I just wanted truth and justice, perhaps in the quietest form possible. Mark settled into his new role quickly, too quickly, almost. He took meetings seriously, handled pressure well, and his team respected him. He never brought up our past, never crossed the line. On the surface, everything was professional, but I could feel the weight of unspoken things in the air every time we were in the same room. One Thursday morning, during a strategy session, he raised a valid point about market expansion. I agreed, nodded, added to his input. When the meeting ended, he lingered behind. I'm glad you trusted me enough to recommend me for this, he said. You didn't have to. No, I replied. I didn't. He looked at me then, truly looked, not with nostalgia or longing, but with understanding, like he finally realized that I didn't need him, that I had never needed him to become who I am now. And yet, I had questions, not for him, for myself. Why had I approved that promotion? Was it really grace, or was it control dressed in elegance? Maybe both. Later that week, Jenna, his former manager, came to my office with a file in hand. She was always efficient, straight to the point. But this time, she hesitated. I don't mean to interfere, she said, placing the file on my desk, but I thought you should see this. It was a complaint. Anonymous. A former client claiming Mark had manipulated numbers in a past project. The incident predated our acquisition, but it hadn't been flagged before Dot. It wasn't conclusive. No smoking gun, just questions. And if there's one thing I've learned in business, it's this. Questions are never harmless. I read through it 3 times. Not because I doubted the claim, but because I needed to understand the man he had been. Before Dot, did he build his career on deception? Or had he simply gotten lost along the way? That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about the day he walked out on me, the suitcase, the silence, the way he didn't even try to stop me, Dot, and now here he was, walking back in, just not through my front door, but through my company's. What if this wasn't redemption? What if it was infiltration? I needed answers, Dot, so I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Daniel. Our former financial advisor, the one who had worked closely with Mark during the time the complaint referenced. He was cautious at first, but after I explained what I'd found, his tone shifted. There were rumors, he admitted over the phone. Your ex-husband was creative with the numbers, nothing illegal. Just enough to make things look shinier than they were. Did you ever confront him? No, I figured it wasn't my place. And he left before anything blew up. Of course he did. That was Mark's pattern, build something shiny, then walk away before the cracks showed. I sat with that knowledge for a long time. Let it settle in my bones, Dot. It wasn't just me he had deceived. Dot, it was everyone. But this time, he wasn't going to leave. Not on his terms. That's when the idea began forming. A quiet plan, Dot measured, Dot elegant, Dot not to destroy him, but to expose him. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. He was climbing the ranks again, and I wouldn't allow another trail of damage under my name. I began watching, Dot collecting, Dot not just reports, but moments, patterns, the way he interacted with junior staff. The subtle way he shifted blame when things didn't go right. The charm he wore like a shield when challenged. He was good. I'll give him that. But I have learned from the best him, and now I was better. One day, during a quarterly review, I brought up the complaint in passing. Just enough to watch his reaction. He froze only for a second, but I saw it. The flicker of panic before the mask returned. I don't recall anything like that, he said smoothly. Probably just someone trying to stir trouble. You know how it is? I nodded, letting it slide, but I knew. He hadn't changed. He had only gotten better at hiding. That evening, I stayed behind in the office, lights dimmed, city glowing outside. I stared at the skyline and whispered to myself, you may work for me now, but that doesn't mean you get to win. I picked up my phone, called Jenna, and said, let's start a quiet audit, no alarms, no drama. I want everything he's touched, every project, every deal, under a microscope. She paused, then said, understood. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability, and sometimes the coldest moves are the most necessary. The audit was quiet, exactly how I wanted it. No official announcements, no accusations. Just Jenna and a small circle of trusted analysts combing through every report, every invoice, every decision Mark had signed off on since the merger. Didn't watch over them. I didn't need to. I had already planted the seed. Now I just had to wait for it to bloom. Meanwhile, Mark continued to play his role, dedicated, respectful, even helpful. He stayed late, offered to mentor younger staff, organized presentations like a man trying to be reborn, Dot, to everyone else. He was turning a new leaf, Dot, to me. It felt like he was trying to erase the past by building a new version of himself, one that looked good under fluorescent lights and polished shoes. But no matter how many suits he wore or smiles he offered, I remembered the man who once walked away from a 5-year marriage without even glancing back. And now, he was under my roof, under my watch. He just didn't know it yet. 2 weeks into the audit, Jenna called me into her office. She didn't say anything at first, just handed me a folder. Inside were inconsistencies. Subtle, but enough to raise eyebrows. Reimbursements that didn't quite add up. A budget approval that seemed inflated. A vendor partnership that bypassed protocol. Nothing explosive, but enough to make the room colder. I read through the papers slowly. My fingers didn't tremble. My eyes didn't narrow. I just nodded once, closed the folder, and said, "Thank you." She studied me for a moment. "You okay?" "I'm fine." I said, "We're not done yet." The next day, I asked Mark to join me for coffee, not in the office, not in a conference room, but across the street at a little corner cafe we used to visit years ago. He looked surprised when he arrived, maybe even a little hopeful, the same way a man might look when he thinks there's still a door left open. I smiled politely, motioned for him to sit. "Relax," I said. "This isn't personal. Is it ever really not personal with us?" He asked, a hint of a grin. I didn't answer that. Instead, I stirred my coffee slowly, then said, "You've been doing good work." "Thank you," he replied cautiously. "Almost too good." He blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" I met his gaze directly. Calm, unmoving. "It means I've been watching." The color drained slightly from his face. He reached for his cup, but didn't drink. "I don't know what you're trying to imply." "I'm not implying anything, Mark. I'm stating facts. Facts that don't add up." Silence stretched between us. People passed outside the window. A child laughed nearby. But between us, the air had thickened. "You think I've done something wrong?" "I think," I said carefully, "that you have a habit of cutting corners. And this time, you're not the only one paying attention." His jaw clenched. "I've changed. I've worked hard to prove that." "I believe you've worked hard," I replied. "But I also believe that people don't change unless they're forced to. And I haven't seen anything yet that tells me you've faced the consequences of the man you used to be." His eyes dropped to the table. "I didn't bring you here to shame you," I continued. "I brought you here to give you a choice. Come clean now or wait until the audit goes public." His head shot up. "Audit?" I leaned back in my chair. "You didn't really think your history wouldn't follow you here, did you?" He swallowed hard. The mask cracked just a little. "I didn't steal," he said quietly. "I didn't say you did," I replied, "but you manipulated." "You exaggerated. You bent the rules in your favor. And whether that's legal or not, it's not acceptable. Not anymore. Not under my watch." He stared at me, and for the first time, I saw something break. Not anger. Not pride. Shame. Real. Raw shame. "I didn't know how to come back from what I did to you," he said. "So I thought if I could make myself useful again, maybe." "Maybe." "What?" I whispered. "That you'd look at me again. Not with hatred, but with something else." I didn't respond because he wasn't wrong. Didn't hate him. Hating him would have made things easier, but I didn't look at him with love either. I looked at him the way you look at something you once held dear, only to realize it was never what you thought. "You had your chance, Mark," I said, rising. "Now all that's left is truth. Tell it while you still can." I left him there, staring into his untouched coffee. Later that day, he submitted a revised report to HR. It acknowledged clerical errors, oversights, and miscommunications. It didn't confess, but it conceded. Enough to buy him time, enough to protect his pride, but not enough to fool me, because the truth was only beginning to unfold, and sometimes the coldest moves are the most necessary. Some people lie to protect themselves. Others lie because it's the only language they've ever known. With Mark, I think it was both. He'd Always had a way with words, charming, persuasive, the kind of man who could talk his way into or out of anything. But charm, I've learned, is a fragile currency. And eventually, even the smoothest talker runs out of things to say when the truth knocks on the door. And the truth? It came in the form of a USB drive. Jenna handed it to me late one evening. For my tea, she said simply. Recovered old financials from his department's shared drive. Pre-merger. I plugged it in without saying a word. Clicked through the folders, opened the files. And there it was. Doctored spreadsheets, duplicate invoices, vendor contracts with inflated values, then rerouted payments to shell companies. Some trace back to accounts tied to a name I recognized. Not his, hers, the woman he had left me for. Her name, Angel, appeared on at least 3 vendor lists as a consultant, only she'd never once stepped into the building. And I knew that because I was the one who now ran it, Mark hadn't just left me for her. He'd helped fund her with company money. For months, even before the divorce, I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. One click away from forwarding it all to the legal department. One click away from ruining him, professionally and personally, but I didn't click, not yet. Instead, I printed the documents, put them in a folder. Unscheduled a meeting. It was just the 2 of us. Conference room for the one with the glass walls and the view of the skyline. I picked it on purpose. I wanted him to see the city he once ruled in his mind and realize it no longer belonged to him. He walked in looking nervous. Not afraid, not yet, but uneasy. You wanted to see me? He asked. I pushed the folder across the table. Open. He did page by page. His fingers turned slower. His face paled. His lips parted, but no words came. Tell me, Mark, I said quietly. When exactly did it start? The stealing or the lying? He looked up, eyes wide, mouth dry. It's not what you think. It never is. I didn't take it for myself. Oh, I said, leaning back, arms crossed. So you stole company funds for her? He said nothing. Was she worth it? I asked, voice low, steady. The woman you left everything for? Was she worth risking your career? Your name? He closed the folder slowly. You don't understand. No, I snapped, just once, the only sharpness in my voice that day. You don't understand. You don't get to walk out on someone, destroy what you built together, and then come crawling back thinking a few weeks of good behavior erased the blood on your hands. He sank into the chair. The air around us felt heavy. The skyline outside glittered, cold and distant. I loved you, he whispered. No, I replied. You loved yourself, and you loved the way I loved you, but you never once knew how to love me back. He looked broken, but I wasn't done. Legal has the files now, I said. An internal investigation starts Monday. Depending on your cooperation, they'll determine if charges are necessary. He looked up sharply. You're pressing charges? I'm not doing anything, I said flatly. This isn't personal, remember? This is business. You're an employee, and this company has rules. His hands trembled, and then he laughed out soft, bitter, defeated. All this time, he said, I thought maybe I had a shot. Not at us, but at redemption. I thought if I could just prove I was still good at something. You had your chance, I said. You had years. He leaned forward, desperate now. Let me explain. Let me fix this. I stood. The time for explanations has passed. You don't get to rewrite history. You lived it? I walked toward the door, then paused. Looked back at the man who once held my world in his hands and crushed it like dust. You know what hurts the most? I said, voice quiet. It's not that you left. It's that you made me doubt my own worth before you did. His eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. because some hearts don't break twice, and mine had already been rebuilt stronger, sharper, and no longer his. The investigation didn't take long. Within 10 business days, the board had seen everything: the falsified documents, the redirected payments, the shell companies with Angela's name cleverly hidden behind vague titles like brand advisor or creative strategist. They weren't just suspicious, they were angry, and I stayed out of it. I showed up to the meetings I was asked to attend, answered questions when they came, but I let the machine run itself. No whispers, no private interventions, just facts, truth, and consequences. Mark was placed on administrative leave pending further action. A formal letter followed 2 days later. Termination, effective immediately. No press release. No drama. Just a name removed from the internal system, an email deactivated, a desk left cold. I watched the security team escort him out through the side lobby, not because I wanted to gloat, but because I needed to see it, to remind myself that endings don't always come with shouting matches or thrown plates. Sometimes they come with silence and a badge turned in. He didn't look at me. Not once. Maybe he couldn't. Or maybe he finally understood what it meant to lose something he never truly appreciated. Angela? She disappeared. Word is she moved out of town weeks ago, long before the audit even began. Cowards always know when the storm's coming. As for me, I didn't celebrate. I didn't raise a glass or post a cryptic quote online. I just kept working, kept building, kept breathing, because that's the thing about survival. It's not loud. It's not cinematic. It's quiet. Like waking up one day and realizing you no longer check your phone for a message. That will never come. Like cleaning out a drawer and finding a photo and feeling nothing. Like hearing his name in passing and not flinching. A month passed, then another. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, I saw a man on the other side of the street, standing still, watching the building. Mark. He looked thinner, tired, his hands in his pockets, eyes following the people who walked in and out, people who used to call him boss, people who now barely remembered his name. He didn't try to cross, didn't wave, didn't speak. Just watched, and I got in my car and drove home. No tears, no hesitation, only clarity. Because here's what I've learned: closure doesn't come in one big moment. It comes in pieces, in ordinary days that feel a little lighter, and choices that feel like freedom. And finally realizing that some people were never meant to stay, not because you weren't enough, but because they were never capable of more. Mark didn't destroy me. He revealed me. He showed me what I could become when I stopped living in someone else's shadow. When I stopped shrinking to fit into a version of love that was never real. Now, I wake up early. I take long walks without checking my phone. I read books I never had time for. I laugh more. Not because everything is perfect, but because I am free. And freedom. That's the real ending. Not revenge. Not karma. Just peace. So to anyone listening, anyone who's ever been left, lied to, or made to feel small, you are not the pieces they abandoned. You are the fire that survived the burn. And one day, when they see you again, stronger, wiser, untouchable, they'll realize they lost the best thing that ever happened to them. And you'll simply smile and walk away, because you no longer owe them anything, not even your pain.